In April, something quietly shifted in the European auto market. For the first time ever, Chinese automaker BYD outsold Tesla in electric vehicle sales across Europe. That's right, BYD took the top spot. It didn't come out of nowhere. Over the past year, BYD has been expanding aggressively across Europe, and when you include plug-in hybrids, their April sales were up more than 300% compared to the same time last year. In fact, in several major European countries, BYD even outsold brands like Fiat, Dacia, and Seat. A lot of people are calling this a turning point. But while BYD was making headlines overseas, something else was brewing back in China, something much less glamorous. Welcome to Beyond the News with Letty, where we break down everything from high-stakes power struggles to societal chaos, all the drama unfolding in China. If you love following China's real-life twists and turns, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Just as BYD was celebrating its success abroad, a storm was quietly forming at home. It started with a comment from Wei Jianjun, CEO of Great Wall Motors, one of China's most prominent car companies. In an interview with Chinese media, he made a pointed comparison. He said BYD reminded him of Evergrande. If you're not familiar, Evergrande was once one of China's largest real estate developers until it collapsed under a mountain of hidden debt, triggering one of the biggest financial crises in the country's recent history. So why would a top auto executive compare BYD to Evergrande? And how should we make sense of BYD's impressive European numbers while it's getting dragged into controversy at home? To answer that, we need to take a closer look at what's actually happening behind the scenes. While BYD's numbers look impressive on the surface, there are growing questions about how real they actually are. Take a look at this footage. It shows fleets of unused BYD vehicles parked in ghost towns across Guangdong and Beijing. Not in dealerships, not at shipping hubs, but in unfinished, deserted residential developments. Why would brand new cars being dumped in abandoned housing projects? Here's the theory. China's EV subsidy policy rewards manufacturers not for cars sold to real customers, but for units delivered, even if they're just parked somewhere to rot. So long as the paperwork shows a delivery, the subsidy flows. Let's look at BYD's delivery figures. In 2021, it sold 740,000 vehicles. In 2022, 1.86 million, a 152.5% increase. And in 2023, 3 million, up another 62%. Behind this breakneck growth is a massive infusion of government support. In BYD's 2024 annual report, it disclosed receiving 10.4 billion yuan in government grants, more than double the 4.6 billion yuan it got the year before. A Chinese financial media outlet calculated that between 2008 and 2022, BYD received at least 6.78 billion yuan in various forms of government assistance. So some analysts are asking, if subsidies are tied to the number of cars sold, is it possible that BYD might be inflating those numbers to maximize their payouts? Let's look at the evidence. In recent months, videos have been emerged from places like Guangdong and Beijing, showing large numbers of brand new BYD vehicles sitting abandoned in half-finished housing developments. Not in dealerships, not in showrooms, just abandoned real estate projects, ghost towns. Why? One explanation is that under China's subsidy system, automakers receive funds not when a customer buys a car, but when a car is delivered to a dealer or registered. That creates a powerful incentive to move vehicles off the books, regardless of whether they're actually sold. In other words, as long as the paperwork says the car was delivered, the subsidy gets paid, even if no one ever drives it. And that leads us to the second red flag. In China today, there is a new phenomenon, zero-mile used cars. These are cars that have never been driven, but are still sold as used. Why? Because they've already been registered, technically making them second-hand. Here's how it works. A dealership, under pressure to meet sales target, registers a batch of cars to make it look like they've been sold. That unlocks government's EV subsidies and tax incentives. Then, the same dealership quietly buys those cars back through its own network and resells them as used vehicles at a discount. From a consumer standpoint, it seems like a win. You get a brand new car for less. But the problem is this: when new cars are flooding the used market at lower prices, why would anyone buy full-price new ones? This drives BYD's average selling price lower and lower, which has sparked concern among its competitors. And that's why the CEO of Great Wall Motors openly criticized BYD, accusing it of engaging in cutthroat price wars that make it hard for other automakers to compete or even survive. And for BYD, this strategy helps inflate sales numbers and secure more government subsidies. For dealers, registering unsold cars as used might help them hit short-term targets. But if actual demand isn't strong enough, and they're selling at lower and lower margins, those targets start becoming dangerous. The business model begins to crack. And that's exactly what happened with BYD's largest dealership group in Shandong, Qiancheng Group. This wasn't a struggling local branch, it was BYD's top-performing flagship dealer in Greater China. But in late May, several of its outlets suddenly shut down. The reason? Cash flow problems. According to a public statement from the company, the collapse was tied to BYD's changing sales policies. Over the past 2 years, BYD had been setting increasingly aggressive vehicle intake targets for dealers, forcing them to buy more and more cars from the factory, even when they couldn't sell them fast enough. By May, Qiancheng's inventory turnover period had reached 2.5 months, well above the industry warning threshold of 1.5 months. In other words, BYD dealers were taking an average of 2.5 months to clear their inventory, while 1.5 months already alarming. BYD dealers couldn't sell the cars fast enough, but they still had to keep ordering more just to hit the target. So they borrowed money, took on debt, and eventually it caught up with them. Boom, cash flow dried up, multiple stores shut down. It's a classic case of forced growth gone wrong. Ghost cars parked in ghost towns, zero-mile used cars flooding the market, and dealerships under pressure. All of it points to one thing: BYD's aggressive yet ultimately unrealistic sales target. And all of this is unfolding against a broader backdrop. China's EV industry is facing massive overcapacity. Right now, the country has the ability to manufacture over 20 million new energy vehicles per year, but actual demand is just a little over 13 million. That puts the industry's capacity utilization rate below 60%. To give you some context, automakers typically need to keep that number above 80% just to break even. Anything lower, and you are bleeding money on idle factories, unsold cars, and wasted labor. Nikkei Asia used a simple analogy. Imagine you run a noodle shop that can make 1,000 bowls a day, but no matter what you do, only 500 customers show up. That's 500 bowls wasted every single day. And it gets worse. Across the street, there is another noodle shop also struggling, slashing prices just to survive. And now, both of you are fighting over the same shrinking pool of customers who can't even finish what one of you is making. And that's what's happening in China's EV market right now. Everyone's pushing out more cars than the market can absorb. The competition is cutthroat. Prices are falling, inventories are piling up, and even top players like BYD are getting caught in the squeeze. So far, we've talked about how BYD's sales growth might not be as solid as it looks. But there is another layer to the story, one that's even more worrying: debt. Recently, a short-selling research firm called GMT Research, the same firm that exposed Evergrande's massive debt problem, released a report on BYD. And what they found raises some serious red flags. According to GMT, BYD may be hiding a huge amount of debt off its balance sheet. Officially, BYD claims that as of mid-2024, its net debt was around 27.7 billion yuan, but GMT's analysis tells a very different story. In their report, published on January 10, 2024, GMT pointed out that if you include things like receivables that were sold off or pledged as collateral, and payables that have been outstanding for more than 90 days, BYD's real net debt may actually be as high as 323 billion yuan, That's over 44 billion US dollars. And just to put that into perspective, BYD's total market value in Hong Kong is about 105 billion US dollars. So if GMT is right, nearly half of the company's value could be weighed down by hidden debt. How is that possible? Let's break it down. One of BYD's tactics is to delay payments to suppliers. A supplier who spoke anonymously said BYD demands price cuts every year, and on top of that, it takes longer and longer to pay the bills. A decade ago, Chinese automakers typically pay their suppliers within 45 days. Today, that number has doubled. According to data from Wind, Chinese car companies now take an average of 182 days to pay what they earn, nearly twice the delay compared to international auto companies. But BYD's delay are even more extreme. In 2021, BYD took an average of 198 days to pay its suppliers. That stretched to 219 days in 2022, and by 2023, it reached 275 days. And by 2025, some payments were reportedly delayed for as long as 12 months. And it doesn't stop there. BYD also uses a platform called D-Link to manage supply chain financing. It works kind of like a commercial IOU, similar to a bank draft, but issued by the company itself instead of a bank. Here's how it works. Let's say BYD buys 1 million yuan worth of parts from a supplier. Instead of paying cash right away, it sends a digital note through D-Link that says, "We will pay you in 60 days." And that supplier now holds a promise, not cash. If the supplier needs cash sooner, BYD might offer a deal. "We will pay you now, but with a 20% discount." So instead of 1 million, the supplier gets 800,000 yuan right away. Alternatively, the supplier can pass that D-Link note on to another supplier, like their own subcontractors, and pass the risk down the chain. This financing model is very similar to what Evergrande used. It shifts financial pressure off the books, creating the illusion of low debt, even though in reality, the company is borrowing money from the entire supply chain. That's why BYD can claim its debt is under 30 billion yuan, while GMT estimates it could be over 300 billion. The gap is huge. But there is where the real risk comes in. If financial conditions tighten, or if suppliers start to doubt whether they will actually get paid, the whole system starts to break down. Suppliers may stop accepting D-Link notes. Cash flow gets squeezed, and once that happens, production slows, deliveries stall, and the pressure ripples across the entire supply chain. It is the same kind of domino effect we saw with Evergrande, only this time it's playing out in the auto industry. So when Great Wall CEO compared BYD to Evergrande, it wasn't just an offhand insult. There is a structural similarity that's hard to ignore. Alright guys, what do you think of BYD? If you had to choose between BYD and Tesla, which would you go for? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Alright, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the BYD story, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. This is Beyond the News. I'm Letty. We talk real China, real stories. Make sure to subscribe. Until next time, bye for now.